Today's movie kicks off with Antonio Shinsky, a young guy living solo in a tiny, cramped apartment in Japan, just getting by. This guy's actually a solid boxer and a trainer too, but he's mixed up with some thugs and criminals who keep dragging him into trouble. So he decides to ditch that crowd and start fresh. He hustles at a few different jobs, including delivery and handling goods, living a low-key life and pinching pennies. He doesn't even own a cell phone. One day, he lands a new gig at a public parking garage run by an old man. He sticks with it, but there's really nothing new to do all day, so he just sits there watching cars go in and out. One day, same as always, he ends up nodding off because he's totally wiped out from staying up late. Suddenly, he wakes up to the voice of a girl sitting right next to him, talking to him like they've known each other forever. Antonio focuses in and realizes she's actually blind, and she thinks she's talking to her old friend, the guy who ran the garage before Antonio. Antonio's pretty thrown off by her and her whole vibe. She even offers him some orange cake, which he takes, all while she still thinks she's chatting with the old man. She pulls out her lunchbox and even brought a carton of juice for him. After a bit, she catches his scent and realizes he's not her old friend. Antonio gets super embarrassed and doesn't know what to do, so she tells him she's used to coming by all the time to hang out with the old guy. She takes the food back, apologizes, grabs her walking cane, and heads out. But when she steps outside, it's pouring rain, and Antonio feels bad for her, so he goes out and asks her to come back inside until the weather clears up. She's really got no other choice, so she agrees, sits with him, and listens to her favorite show on TV. Antonio watches her, noticing how happy she is, just listening to her program. Once the show's over, the weather's fine, so she gets up to leave and gives Antonio her lunchbox again as a gift. Before she heads out, she tells him, "Don't forget to water the olive plant by the door." Mention that the old man really loved it and took great care of it. At night, Antonio takes a shower and heads to his room, trying to clear out the old man's stuff and get the place organized. He eats the food the girl gave him and makes sure to water that olive plant. The next day, we see the girl fixing her breakfast. She lives alone and works as a call center agent. She's actually really good at handling those annoying, rude customers, and she's got a friend at work who always backs her up when someone gives her a hard time. Then there's her boss, who's a total jerk and super nosy, constantly trying to get under her skin, but she just puts up with it because she's terrified of losing her job. We still don't know this girl's name yet, but anyway, we head over to Antonio at the boxing gym where he used to train. He apologizes to his coach, Gene, for all the trouble he caused back when he was hanging out with those thugs. The coach accepts his apology, but the gym owner is still salty and won't let it go. The coach tells Antonio he can train with them, but Antonio's hesitant. The owner shows up and tells him to put on his gloves, but Antonio says no, explaining he just came to apologize and won't be coming back to the gym anymore. Antonio also calls up an old girlfriend to apologize for how he treated her. She tells him she's married now and accepts the apology, but makes it clear he shouldn't call her again. Later, Antonio's sitting at the garage, spotting the blind girl and low-key hoping she'll come talk to him. Sure enough, she shows up and asks about the old man, but Antonio tells her he hasn't come by. He hands her back her lunchbox, thanking her and telling her the food was amazing. She mentions that the olive plant smells great too, and he lets her know it's actually started to bloom because he's been taking such good care of it. After that, they sit down to watch that TV show she loves. Suddenly, she catches a whiff of something gross and tells him he needs to open the windows. The smell is still there, so she asks, "Do you work out or something?" Because there's a serious sweat smell going on. Antonio gets totally embarrassed, realizing it's just his old, stinky shoes. She keeps talking and tells him that even though she can't see, her other senses are super sharp, and she can tell a lot about a person's personality just from their scent and their voice. And man, imagine what she's thinking about Antonio's smell right now. Then she asks him to describe the lead actress from her show, so he tells a little white lie and says she's wearing earrings just like hers, which makes her feel totally amazing. He gives her some peaches to snack on, and finally, she tells him her name is Kaori Kashiwagi. He introduces himself, gives her the whole nice to meet you routine, and she notices his hands are all rough from hard work. She tells him she'll be back next week to visit. When she gets home, she's chilling and eating her peaches, but the bathroom drain gets clogged, she slips, falls, and ends up breaking her leg. Back at the garage, Antonio is waiting for her like crazy, just listening for the sound of her walking cane. When Kaori finally shows up, she's like, "What's that good smell?" And of course, we find out Antonio bought himself some brand new shoes. They watch her show together where the lead girl is head over heels for the guy, so Kaori asks him, "Is the hero handsome?" Antonio tells her he's good looking, but definitely a player. She laughs and asks, "Are you as handsome as him? Don't lie to me." Antonio gets all stuck, not knowing what to say because he's worried he's not that great looking. He stays quiet for a bit, thinking of an answer. So Kaori tells him that looks aren't everything, and beauty isn't the most important thing in life. And we can see right here that Antonio has totally fallen for her without even realizing it. Kaori gets up to leave and says goodbye, but as she's crossing the street, a car hits her, and she goes down, unable to walk. Antonio scoops her up and rushes her to the hospital. At the hospital, they wrap up her leg, and Antonio goes with her to drop her off at home. On the way, she asks for his name, but he's too shy to say it because it's English, not Japanese. Kaori laughs because he won't tell her and says, "Fine then, I'll just call you uncle or old man." Since she can't walk, Antonio tells her he's going to carry her, and she jokes, "Don't come crying later when you regret carrying me." He ends up giving her a piggyback ride all the way to her place, but her house is way up high with a massive flight of stairs. Antonio stands there in total shock when he sees them, and Kaori just laughs and says, "Didn't I tell you not to regret it?" Antonio takes a deep breath, full of love, and carries her up every single step. After he gets her inside, she asks him to fix her bathroom drain. He clears it out and tells her she needs to stop dropping her socks in there, which makes her super embarrassed. She hands him 2 concert tickets as a thank you for everything and tells him he should go with a friend. Antonio goes quiet for a second, and she realizes he doesn't really have any friends, so she says, "How about I go with you instead?" And Antonio agrees right away. On the day of the concert, Kaori gets all dolled up in a gorgeous dress, taking extra care of herself and feeling like a total princess for the first time. So they actually head to the concert together, and by the end of it, Kaori asks Antonio to describe the whole scene and the band for her. She's having the time of her life. After the show, they hit up a barbecue joint for dinner. Kaori tells him she's loving the smell of the food, but she's eating so much, she ends up spilling it all over her clothes, and when she tries to clean it up, she just makes it a bigger mess. Kaori starts opening up about her life, telling Antonio how she studied sculpting in college and used to come to the same restaurant back in the day with her parents. She starts grilling him about his life and how he spends his time. So he tells her he's juggling the garage gig with a delivery job. Then she drops the question. "So, are you married, seeing someone a player, or what's your deal?" Antonio goes dead silent and doesn't say a word. So she's like, "Bad joke, right?" He asks her, "What do you get out of knowing my past anyway?" And she tells him she just wants to get to know him and everything about his life. Antonio totally brushes her off, which makes Kaori feel super awkward, so she gets up to leave. When they get to her place, she apologizes for pushing him, and that's when he finally tells her, "My name is Antonio." Kaori is floored when she finds out he's only 24. He tells her he's actually a really good boxer, but has a dark past because he ran with some thugs who dragged him into their mess. Kaori's speechless and doesn't know what to say, so she just thanks him for all his help and heads inside. The next day at work, Kaori's boss calls her in and tries to give her a birthday present, but she turns him down, reminding him he already gave her those concert tickets for her birthday. He tells her this new gift is a super expensive necklace and insists she takes it. He totally takes advantage of the fact that she can't see, staring her down with some really shady intentions, and asks her out. Right then, Kaori's friend walks into the office and tells her a customer is waiting for her outside. Meanwhile, we see Antonio with his coach and the gym owner, who are trying their best to convince him to get back into boxing. Antonio politely declines and apologizes, but the coach tells him, "From the first day I saw you training, I knew you were going to be a world champ." Antonio drops a bombshell on them, admitting he spent 3 years in prison because he was working for a gang leader named Smoko. He explains that this guy was ruthless, torturing and killing people for cash, and Antonio's job was to mess up anyone who betrayed the gang or tried to quit. He finally got busted, did his time, and now he's just trying to start over. The coach and the owner are totally shocked. Later, Antonio visits the orphanage where he grew up. His old caregiver is thrilled to see him and asks if he's still mixed up with that gang. He shows her his hands, letting her know he got the gang tattoo removed, which makes her so happy. She gives him a handmade hair tie that the kids at the orphanage made and suggests he give it to someone he loves. Antonio starts tripping down memory lane, thinking about his childhood there and his old friend Smoko, who used to make him hit the other kids, telling him that the weak have no place in this world. Then we cut to Kaori, who's done with work and heads home, only to find her boss lurking outside her apartment. He forces his way in and sees she hasn't even opened his gift yet, which makes him flip out. He gets aggressive and tries to force the necklace on her, but Kaori manages to scratch his hand and tries to push him away. Right at that moment, Antonio bursts in and starts laying into him. Kaori begs him not to hurt the guy too bad, so Antonio just breaks one of his fingers and warns him, "If you ever come near her again, I'm breaking your neck." After the boss scrambles away, Kaori is a total wreck, crying and shaking from the shock. She asks Antonio, how am I supposed to go back to work after this? And he's stunned. He's like, wait, you're actually thinking about going back after what just happened? She tells him that since she's blind, she won't find another job, and this was her only shot, so she plans on showing up tomorrow like nothing happened. Antonio gets up to leave, but leaves that handmade hair tie on the table for her. A few days later, Antonio's at the garage with Kaori on his mind 24/7. Suddenly, she shows up and tells him she finally quit that creep's job and wants to go on a trip to clear her head. Antonio takes her to the beach, and they have a blast together. He tells her how he used to come to this shore with his mom when he was a kid. Kaori's hanging on every word and asks him to find her a piece of sea glass. He gets one for her, and as she feels it with her hands, she says that going through a lot of pain is what teaches people and changes them for the better. She hands him the glass and tells him, "This is a souvenir of our bond." After that, Antonio gets back into the boxing gym and starts training hard. He even buys Kaori a dog named Suko, rearranges her whole apartment, and opens up the windows for her. Kaori finally feels the change and the light flooding into the place. She asks Antonio to describe what he looks like and starts touching his face to feel his features. She tells him to look into her eyes, and they share their first kiss. Antonio gets busy with his training and enters a tournament, while Kaori gets back into sculpting, making pottery and waiting for him to come home. Antonio finally makes it back, and Kaori gives him a full-body massage. She feels the scar on his hand and asks, "Is this a burn mark?" Antonio lies and says, "Yeah." He tells her she doesn't need to work because he's going to win big at these tournaments and open a shop for her to sell her pottery. Sure enough, Antonio wins the championship. Smoko, his old gang leader and childhood friend from the orphanage, is there watching him. He barges into the locker room and gets into it with Antonio's coach. The coach insults him, but Antonio steps in to cool things down, telling Smoko he's never going back to that life before walking away. The next day, Kaori takes Antonio to visit her parents' graves, and she starts telling him all about the day of the crash and how she'd just gotten her license and was so hyped, driving around with her mom and dad. But then, out of nowhere, she saw this guy falling off a building, totally on fire, and the sight just broke her, so she lost control and the car flipped, which killed both her parents and left her blind. Antonio is listening so closely, and then he looks at the date on the tombstone, and it hits him like a ton of bricks because on that exact day, he was busy torturing some snitch for his gang, and he actually set the guy on fire and tossed him out of his apartment. Right then, he realizes he's the reason for everything that happened to Kaori and her family, and he starts hating himself so much, feeling all this heavy guilt for her parents dying and her going blind. What kills him even more is seeing Kaori blaming herself and feeling guilty, like she's the one who caused their death, so he starts training like a beast, just to punch out all that pain. One day, Kaori starts feeling this sharp pain in her eyes, and Smoko shows up and offers Antonio a huge stack of cash to fight in an illegal underground match, but Antonio turns him down and goes to find Kaori at home. But she's not there, so he panics and rushes to the hospital. And when he sees her, he settles down a bit, but the doctor says she's got a detached retina and needs surgery ASAP, and it's going to cost a fortune. So Antonio feels totally suffocated and goes to the orphanage to see his old caregiver, and she tells him the kids there are making music boxes and asks him for his favorite song, so they can make one for him. And he tells her he feels like his past is never going to end, but she tells him he's already paid his dues and started fresh, and he says he's scared the people he loves will get hurt because of his past, but she tells him the past is forgotten and the present is what you change. So stand by the people you love, but most of all, you gotta forgive yourself. And the next day, he takes Kaori out and asks why she didn't say anything about the surgery, and she says it was way too expensive, and she actually sees her blindness as a punishment for killing her parents. And he's like, how can you even think like that? And why waste your life not seeing the people you love? And he tells her she's got to do it so she can see their future kids when they get married, and she finally gives in. And when they get back to her place, they're shocked to see the gang's tag on her door. So Antonio goes to Smoko and tells him to leave her out of their mess. And Smoko says he's got to do the illegal fight. So Antonio agrees and gets a ton of cash, and he takes the money to his coach and tells him everything. And the coach is devastated for him. But Antonio explains the money is for Kaori's surgery. So the coach takes it and says he'll handle the hospital bills. And Antonio goes to the garage and burns every single thing he owns, all his photos and papers. And then he goes with Smoko for the death match, where you either knock the other guy out cold or he dies, and the fight starts and Antonio is fired up and dominating, but then the tides turn and the other guy starts beating him up brutally. And Antonio hits the floor, about to black out and lose. But suddenly he finds his strength and gets back up to land a massive knockout blow and wins the fight. Even though he's all bloodied up, and he sees his coach in the crowd cheering him on. And meanwhile, Kaori's finished her surgery and can finally see again, so Antonio calls his coach just to check in on her. We see Kaori looking totally heartbroken over Antonio being gone, and she's struggling to move on without him. Plus, she's moving out of her place because the building's getting torn down. Right then, a package arrives for her from Antonio, and it's a music box playing her favorite song, so she figures out it came from the orphanage and heads over there to visit. That's where she meets the nun, who spills everything about Antonio's past and how he was actually the reason for the accident that happened to her and her parents back in the day. She tells her how he did everything just to make up for his mistakes before vanishing. Kaori totally breaks down after hearing all this, and the nun tells her she's got to start her life over. Jump forward 2 years. She's got this big shop for her pottery and a sculpting studio, plus she's volunteering at a rehab center as a massage therapist. And her life is finally stable. One day at the center, she meets a patient who's paralyzed, and we find out it's actually Antonio, but she doesn't recognize him. Antonio's in total shock when he sees her and tries his best to hide who he is. But during the massage session, Kaori gets this weird feeling like she knows this guy, and she checks his name, but it sounds totally unfamiliar to her. After a couple of days, Antonio gets better and can walk with a crutch, so he leaves the center and spots a shop with the name Antonio on it. He's curious to see what's inside, so he walks in and finds the olive plant and buys it. Suddenly, he sees the music box he sent Kaori, and when he plays the song, he realizes this shop belongs to her. And he starts crying while remembering all their memories together. So he takes the plant and leaves. But as he's heading out, the dog, Suko, recognizes him and runs over, knocking him to the ground. Kaori comes out and sees him, realizing he's the guy from the rehab center, so she apologizes while holding Suko and offers to help him out or give him a ride. But he turns her down and walks away. She goes back into her shop, and the girl working with her mentions that someone came in, bought the olive plant, played the music, and was crying. So Kaori realizes that was Antonio, and that's why Suko recognized him and knocked him down. She rushes out and starts running to catch him, but she can't find him anywhere. At that moment, Antonio has gone to the same beach he visited with Kaori before to end it all, and he's holding that piece of sea glass she gave him as a souvenir. Just as he's about to walk into the water, he hears Kaori calling his name, so he looks back and stops. Kaori stands in front of him, touching his face and asking him to come back home with her. And he tells her that her arms are his first and last home. And that's a wrap on today's movie. Stay tuned for new videos. Catch you later.